I'm 31, and this whole thing, it wasn't my fault. I mean, not really. It was just a little white lie to get what I wanted, and it completely blew up my face. The title says it all, right? I told my boss he made me uncomfortable to get a schedule change. He got fired. Then HR fired me too. It all started with this guy, Derek. I had been dating Derek for about a year, and things were good. You know, he was a sweetheart, a total people pleaser. He'd bring me coffee in the mornings, remember my favorite snacks, and always listen to me vent about my coworkers. He was overly accommodating, the kind of guy who would do anything to avoid a fight. If I wanted to stay in, we stayed in. If I wanted to go out, we went out. It was nice, for a while. It made me feel like I had control, like I was the main character in our relationship. But after a while, it started to feel boring. I wanted someone with a little more fire, someone who would challenge me. He was so easygoing that it felt like he didn't have his own personality. I work at this place that does logistics for a bunch of different companies. It's not glamorous, but the money is decent. The only downside was my schedule. I was on the early shift, which meant I had to be there at 6. Zara. Sharp. I hated it. I'm not a morning person. And it meant I had to get up at 4:30 me just to get ready and drive to work. I tried to switch with my coworkers, but no one wanted the early shift. I asked my supervisor, David, if I could move to a later shift, but he said the schedule was set and that he couldn't change it. He was kind of an old school guy, very by the book. He wasn't mean or anything, just rigid. Meanwhile, my relationship with Derek was getting stale. He was always trying to be perfect, always trying to please me, but I was starting to resent it. I'd make these little jabs, little criticisms disguised as jokes. Like, if he wore a shirt I didn't like, I'd say, oh, did you get dressed in the dark today? And he would just laugh and say, yeah, I guess so. He never fought back. He never defended himself. It was like hitting a pillow. It was just so unfulfilling. I wanted to have a real argument, to feel that passion, but he would just let everything slide. One night, I went out with my friend, Chloe. She's the kind of girl who always knows the right thing to say. The one who always has a plan. She was telling me about how she got a raise just by mentioning that she was feeling undervalued. She said that you have to play the game. You know, you can't just ask for what you want. You have to make them think it's their idea. I was venting to her about my schedule, about how I hated getting up so early, and about how David, my boss, was being so unhelpful. I also mentioned to her about Derek's lack of personality. I just said, he's just so nice. He never argues. He just goes along with whatever I want. I could see the look on her face, like she didn't get it. But she just said, sounds like a good problem to have. I just knew she was judging me inside, but I didn't care. Then she said something that made a light bulb go off in my head. She said, well, you know, they're really careful about that kind of stuff these days. Workplace harassment. All you have to do is make it sound like you're uncomfortable, and they'll move mountains for you. And I saw my opportunity. I had to get out of that early shift. I was so tired of waking up in the dark, of being tired all the time. I was just tired of it all. So, the next morning, I went to work and I pulled David aside. I made sure to do it in the break room, where no one else was around. I started by asking again about the schedule, and he gave me the same answer. I'm sorry, Skylar, but the schedule is set. We can't have everyone on the later shift. It's just not how it works. I took a deep breath, and I just went for it. Well, David, the thing is, I don't feel comfortable coming in so early. It's just, sometimes I feel like you're a little too observant when I come in. Like you're always watching me. It just makes me feel a little weird. He just stood there, looking at me with a completely blank face. I could see the wheels turning in his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Skylar? He said, his voice a little shaky. I'm just doing my job? I just shrugged and said, yeah, I know. It's probably nothing. It just makes me a little uncomfortable. That's all. I was just hoping a schedule change could help. I thought that was the end of it. I thought he would just change my schedule to avoid a problem. But a few days later, I was called into HR. I went in, and there was this woman, a total witch with a capital B. She just stared at me, then said, we need to talk about your recent complaint against David. I pretended to be surprised. Complaint. So, I didn't complain. I just told him I was uncomfortable. I didn't want him to get in trouble. I tried to sound innocent, like I was just trying to solve a problem and it had gotten out of hand. I really thought I had a plan. I thought I had everything under control, but I didn't, not at all. The HR woman just looked at me with this intense stare and said, "It doesn't matter what your intention was. Skylar, you made an official complaint, and we have to investigate." The company takes these things very seriously. A few days later, I found out David had been fired. I was shocked. I didn't actually want him to get fired. I just wanted a new schedule. But I also felt this weird sense of triumph. I had won. I had gotten what I wanted. My new schedule was posted the next day, and I was on the late shift. I was so excited. I went home and told Derek all about it, leaving out the part about the complaint. Of course. I just said, I finally got what I wanted. I just talked to HR, and they changed my schedule for me. He was so happy for me, so supportive. He said, "That's amazing. Babe, I told you could do it." I just nodded and smiled, feeling a little guilty, but mostly just relieved. Then, about a week later, I was called back into HR. I went in, expecting to talk about my new schedule or something. But the witch from before was there, and she had this stern, unyielding look on her face. "Skylar," she said, "we've completed our investigation. We've spoken to everyone, including a few people who have come forward to say that you've used similar tactics in the past to get what you want. We also have proof that you were aware of the consequences of your actions." I started to panic. What? That's not true. I would never. She just cut me off. "We've also spoken with David. He has been a loyal employee for 15 years, with no record of any complaints. We found no evidence to support your claims. In fact, we have evidence that you have a history of making false claims and of being difficult to work with." She went on to say that they had reviewed my past performance reviews, and they mentioned a pattern of me being manipulative, of using strategic vulnerability to get what I wanted. My old managers had even written it down. It was all there, in black and white. She said that they couldn't have an employee who was a liability, who was willing to make false accusations to get what she wanted. "It's a matter of trust. Skylar," she said, "and we don't trust you." And just like that, I was fired. She told me to pack my things and that I would be escorted out by security. I was completely stunned. I couldn't believe it. I had done all of this just to get a schedule change, and now I had no job. I got in my car and just drove. I drove and drove until I had to stop because I was so angry I was shaking. I was so angry at David for getting fired, at the HR woman for being a complete witch, at Chloe for giving me the idea in the first place, and at Derek for just being so passive and unhelpful. I went home and just sat there, in my apartment, on my couch, feeling completely alone. I didn't know what to do. The HR woman had said that they would be calling my future employers and telling them why I was fired. My career, my future, was completely gone. I couldn't believe it. I had just tried to get a new schedule. That's all? It was all I wanted? A few days later, Derek came home and saw me just sitting on the couch, not doing anything. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked, and I just lost it. I told him everything. I told him how I had lied, how I had gotten David fired, and how I had gotten fired myself. I expected him to be angry, to yell at me, to finally show some kind of emotion. But he didn't. He just sat there, listening to me. And then he just said, "Skylar, why would you do that?" I just looked at him, and I could see that he was genuinely confused. Because I wanted a new schedule, Derek. I was so tired of getting up so early. I was so tired of it all. And David wouldn't help me. What was I supposed to do? He just shook his head. "You could have just kept looking for another job. You could have just told me. We could have figured it out together." And that's when it hit me. He was right. He had always been so supportive, so willing to help me. But I had just never asked. I had always been so focused on what I could do myself, on how I could manipulate a situation to get what I wanted, that I had completely forgotten that I had someone who would have helped me without me having to resort to all this. But I didn't want to admit that. I couldn't admit that. I just got angry again. "You don't get it. Derek, you never get it? You're just so passive. I needed someone to fight for me, not just sit there and agree with everything I say. And I knew it wasn't fair. I knew it was a cheap shot. But I was so angry and so scared that I just lashed out. He just looked at me with this sad, defeated expression. "I've always been there for you. Skylar, I've always tried to do what you wanted, but I can't be what you want me to be anymore. I can't be a punching bag for you to take your anger out on." He just stood up, and I knew what was happening. He was leaving. He was finally leaving. I didn't try to stop him. I just sat there, watching him pack his bag. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just left. He just walked out the door and was gone. I was alone. Completely alone. I had no job, no friends, and now no boyfriend. And I had done it all to myself. But I still couldn't admit that. I couldn't admit that I was wrong. I couldn't admit that I had made a terrible mistake. I just sat there, in the silence, and all I could think about was how everyone had betrayed me, how David had gotten me fired, how the HR woman had ruined my career, how Chloe had given me such a bad idea, and how Derek had just left me when I needed him the most. They were all to blame. They all were. It was so much easier to think that than to think that I had done it all myself. A few months later, I'm still unemployed. I've applied for dozens of jobs, but every time I get an interview, I can tell they've already spoken to my old HR. My phone calls don't get returned, and my emails are never answered. I've been living off my savings, but they're almost gone. I haven't been able to talk to Chloe, and I've been completely ghosted by all our mutual friends. I see their pictures on social media sometimes, and they're all out, having fun, living their lives. And I'm just here, alone. The other day, I saw a picture of Derek. He was with some other woman, and he had this huge, genuine smile on his face. She looked happy, too. He was standing there, and she had her arm around him. They looked so happy, so comfortable with each other, and I felt that same bitterness again. It wasn't fair. He got to move on. He got to be happy. And I was stuck here, with nothing. I just sat there, looking at the picture, and I could hear Chloe's voice in my head saying, "You have to play the game." And I did. I played the game, and I lost. And now, I have nothing left to show for it. And I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I'm the only one to blame for this. But I won't ever admit that. Not to anyone.